Hello guys, and welcome back to the guided playthrough of Satisfactory, and today we are going to be working on the decorating of this world so that it looks a little bit more like this. And more importantly, with all of the improvements to the decoration, we are going to be sharing this world to you all so that you can jump in and check it out, see how we've done everything, or if you want to use it for your own save, you can. And this is only possible because the last few episodes, we've really made a move on the build. We have a basic rail line setup providing logistics to our world, which we can extend later. There's dedicated storage for all of our basic items, steel production, heavy modular frame production, as well as rubbers, plastics, and computers. And more importantly, we have stable power production. And if you're wondering how we got our power grid so flat, then do make sure to check out our previous episode where we actually troubleshooted all the power in our save. But we do have a ton to get through today, so without further ado, let's go through everything that we're going to be talking about and get started. So the first things that I want to talk about are the external decorations. I'm going to show you how I add depth to my factories and decorate them so that they look better in my eyes at least. From there we'll also be talking about blueprints for Decor and then the internal side of decoration before talking about the save share and what I see us doing next in this playthrough. So without further ado, let's jump to it. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about today is external design. You can see we already got started with the outside here, and we will work on this and try and build from what we already have, but it's by no means done as it stands. And everything that we're going to be doing today is just off the cusp, out of my head. We're going to experiment and see what works, what doesn't. If it doesn't, we'll just redo it. And hopefully we'll come up with something nice. But the first thing that we need to do is head over to the awesome shop with all of our wonderful coupons that we have here. And let's not forget that we have some in here as well. Look at that. Oh, we've got 136. That's not bad going. And from here, we're going to unlock a load more to play around with. This is where you'll find all of the decorational stuff, also cleaner pipes. And we're just going to grab essentially anything that we think will be useful for decoration, which most definitely will include some kind of lighting. By the way, I have just released a lighting guide if you want to specifically look at lighting, but these ones do require power, so we'll probably avoid using them for the time being. Let's have a look at the customizer. We'll take all of these as well. Love the metal finishes and the coated concrete foundation. This makes it look really shiny. It's a great look for our builds. And then we can get also some of these patterns for our foundations. We'll stick with these for now and see what we can make with it. We can also grab some curved pieces. Well, let's just unlock all of these because I'm sure we'll find some way to play around with them. Same with any walls that there are. These will all be useful. Roofing. Tons of beams and beam variants since 1.1, which is lovely. And railings. We've got some ventilation pieces we might use. Personal elevator we'll take. Not that we need it just yet. And hopefully... Oh, can you believe it? We're 4 short. In that case, let's get rid of the gold or Caterium coating for now. But now that we have unlocked all of those items, let's get started with external design. Now, there are different styles of architecture that you can use in Satisfactory, and I do implore you to go and have a look at different architectural styles or inspiration online for your factories. A very common one which looks great is brutalist design. That's the kind of designs that you'll see creators like Kibitz doing. But I wanted to move away from architectural style and more just generally how you can layer up your builds to look better. And the first thing that I would suggest is really adding depth to your build. And we've already started that with this. So you can see that we have Our outer layers are big pillars in the center, and then we also have smaller pillars on the inside, which are going to house our glass windows, which we can now do. But on top of this, we can also get some of our new items like the pillars and beams, and we can play on that by layering it just outside of the build, like here, and just nudging it in front. And so we're just adding a little bit more detail. And then you can add something like your beams to it. One thing that I quite like doing is having a little gap in between them. And you can see how doing something like this just adds a little bit more to the build. So think of it a bit like layering a cake. You have your sponge, your base layer, and then you have your icing on top, and then you add details on top of that. And that's what we're going to be doing for this. So taking something like this, I'm going to hopefully do this really quickly. We're going to maybe change the colors out a little bit and then show you how it looks from the outside. So I guess first thing I should do is probably get a shot of the build before I add the supports. Another thing, I'll keep this one for context. We're also going to add some windows to the front. This is great, as I mentioned, for the natural lighting. And you can also build depth onto this as well. We could maybe play around with the round beam in the center. So we just nudge that in and then bring that out. That might look quite nice. Yeah, I quite like that. And so here we are with it for the time being. I'm going to quickly go over all of these pieces and just give them a brush up with a little bit of extra depth. And we'll then talk about that, and then we'll go on to talk about materials. And having added just a little bit of roofing as well as the things that we've just mentioned, I'm really happy with how this has turned out so far. But we're not done yet. I still want to add sections of ramped wall along here so that it goes up. And equally, I'm going to have to work out a better way of doing that, but I'd like to cover this. I suppose the other thing that we can do with this, and it ties into the next thing, is playing around with different materials. So I'm not too keen on this metal gridded look on top of here. So we can play around with different materials that might work better. This is the shiny coated wall, coated flooring. This uses plastic and concrete, and it has quite a nice look to it. So what I'll probably do is add, yeah, I think that looks quite nice. So I'm going to add this to all of these, and then we're also going to play around with some lighting and color as well. So one thing that I do very much enjoy adding to my builds is some kind of lighting in the form of signs. Now these can work really well, especially if they're filling up a gap. So if we place this here, what we can do with this is turn up the emission strength and then remove any kind of details. So we've removed the background. We're going to remove the layout, so we don't want this bar. So that's just a plain sign. And then from here, we're going to change the color of the sign to something that we want to see on this build. So maybe we want a deep orange. Well, with the emission turned up, we can now, if we back off, see that we've got this light strip, and we can just repeat this all the way up to the top. And we can do this for each section. And it's just a great way to make your builds pop, especially if you're playing around with different colors. So we try to stick with 2 to 3 colors. And so we have black, white, and gray, and then we'll add another color onto that, which in this case is the orange, which works particularly well. And sometimes I'll have a contrasting color as well. And I think that works really well with my builds. But equally, you can change the colors to suit your style. If you are interested in playing around with different colors for your builds, I do highly recommend researching, doing a little bit of information into color theory. So if I just open this up, hit really quickly, you can see a color wheel here, and you have various harmonies, nicely put here, of colors. So you can have a single one which goes from like a darker version to a lighter version of that particular color, or you can have complementary, which are two different colors from the opposite side of the spectrum. So you have green and red works well, blue and orange, purple and like a lighter green. And then there's split complementary, and it's all about how these different colors work together, and this can work really well in your builds. So I highly recommend, if you're looking for color schemes in Satisfactory, to do a little bit of research into color theory. But I do digress, so I'm going to quickly fill out all of this as we see here, and from there we'll start looking at other parts of the factory to work on. And it's a new day and we're a little bit further into the build. I decided to change the orange for the red, and I'm really liking this color with the strip of orange down the center. There's still quite a bit of black, so we might have to do something about that. And you can see on the top we've now got roofing and also some glass roof as well, because that's going to let light into the build, which we'll talk about later. So I'm still carrying on with this for the time being, and what I will do is finish the outer shell of all of this, then we can talk about any additional like details that we're going to add, and then look at doing the inside of this factory and then the other areas as well. One thing that I have been doing is adding, alongside all of the ceiling pieces, trim. I think this is a great way to frame your builds, and if we look at the piece to the left of us, you'll notice how, oh, I've already done this one. Have I done this one as well? Yeah. If I get rid of this, you'll see how the connection looks quite flat, and just having this little trim along the edges is a great way to add a border to that, and just to make it pop a little bit more. Taking a step back here, I'm really happy with how this is coming along. I still think there's more that we could do to this. I'd quite like to add the luminescent signs along the diagonals as well. We of course need to do something with the front, but as a starting point, I think this is really solid. And when it comes to doing this kind of lighting up along the diagonal, the way that we can do this is going to be to just grab a beam here, and then run that in diagonal mode up to the top. And then from here, what we can do is grab that and place it. Look at that. Perfect. And doing details like this, and thinking about it, I should have done it at the start of this, it can take a huge amount of work. So I highly recommend, if you are going to do something like this, to develop blueprints for this, as it will save you so much time at the end. That's something like that. That's so slightly off. That's going to drive me insane. Okay, and then from here, let's also add on the outside the beam. That's just going to frame it and keep it in keeping with what we've just done. Now, it is possible to do too much, but I think that's just about right. So I'll do this for the rest of the large pieces, not all of them, just the large black sections. And then we'll start working on the front decoration. I'm really happy with how this is coming along, but I'm feeling there's one more thing that we need to do before we start on the front of this build, and then we'll go through the whole process. And that is, having done all the lighting along the sides, I think it would look great having a beam of light down the middle as well. So I'm going to do that, and then we will get started all over doing the same process at the front. I am so happy as to how this has turned out. I don't know why we've got so much Z fighting though on the borders. We never used to have that, so I don't know if that's a 1.1 thing, but you can see we are now ready with this to get started on the front. Speaking of which, I did add just a little lip on the front here and repositioned the belt slightly so that we have a bit more space to work around with. One of the biggest rules to take away when building in Satisfactory, it doesn't matter what you're building, whether it's a detailed factory or just a factory line, you should always try and give yourself more space than you actually need. And that's the same when it comes to doing design. So for the front wall here, we could just layer a wall in front and use just a single panel, but it's going to look very flat and a little bit weird. So instead, we're going to have to add a few more foundations just in front of this conveyor bus and actually cover the limestone bus there so that we have a little bit more to work with. And the reason for that is I like to have at least one whole foundation to play with when it comes to building, because it means that we can naturally add depth by just playing around with matching foundations and walls, which is exactly what we did when we started off with this wall here. You see we have a foundation's worth of width to play around with, and then we're using the big foundations as well as the simple walls in between, just to give us a little bit of depth. And then on top of that, we've started layering things such as the round beams and the pillars at the top here. Now, it would be fantastic if we are going to be placing a foundation on top to still be able to see the conveyor bus beneath. So we're going to incorporate that as part of the build. So we're going to be still using the same color assets that we've got elsewhere. So we'll use this black charcoal wall. And we'll also take the lighting design elements that you saw earlier with these. Do we have a... Yeah, I didn't think we had any oscillators. That's a shame. What we can do with these is if we were to make it slightly brighter when we place these, and we go with something like a white light or a blue one, we can use this to just highlight the bus underneath. So let's see if we can do that really quickly. And if we go with like a really light blue. Unfortunately, it's not that bright. We need the bigger lights to really do that. You get a slight... Yeah, it's next to nothing. You can just see the very top being highlighted. Maybe we'll come back with a larger sign, one of these ones, when we have oscillators being produced. Regardless, we still want this to be on show. So let's get rid of any foliage. So in between, we'll have to wait for Noblisk for this one. And then we'll add... Ooh, we have space here. So what we can do is if we place this along the... Oh, but then we won't see the bus, will we? Okay, let's change this to the full frame window. And we're going to just nudge this slightly inside. And then we'll start it on this foundation and run that all the way across. I think eventually we will add the light, but for the time being, just having that will look quite nice. And then we can place this underneath. In fact, what I will do for this particular one is I'm going to add 2 layers of that wall. So one in front of the other. It's just going to make it look slightly chunkier, which is quite nice. And then what if we turn this one red and run that? Again, we're playing with the color theme that we already have, which is the dark burgundy red color and the black. And by sticking with a color theme, it allows the build to blend more with the other builds that we'll have around us, hopefully. That is already much better. Actually, hang on. What if we do something like this? I'm just going to bring that down so it's in the middle. And here we're going to use this little blank shape to create a border around our build, or this sign, sorry. So we'll paint that black, but we'll turn this one kind of the sharp bluey green color. How would that look? Oh, I quite like that. So we're going to now run that all the way along these. And as you can see, we're just layering up the front. And I think maybe we could do with a little beam. And then what if we add some kind of metallic swatch to it? Yeah, that's nice. Sweet. Well, I'm gonna do that now. Okay, I'm happy with that. But now that we've got the foundation to the front here, we've got a whole foundation and then half's worth of space to play around with. And we're going to do the exact same system so that we can repeat this. And then we're going to be talking about blueprints that we can use for decorating as well. Of course, the first thing that's going to have to change is the power to this facility. So we have currently everything running along here, and we're going to have to make sure that we reconnect this afterwards. But with this big space available to us, what I think would be best is, rather than just run it straight down, is to play around with the angles. So if we grab our foundations, we have these up corners and also down corner ramps, and together they can be used to create a diagonal section. I don't know if we can see it from here. Here you go. So we can bring this out just a little bit further, and we can change the material as well so it coordinates with this. We could go with maybe the metal, something a little bit different, or we could choose to stay with the shiny, although I feel that if you are going to go with the shiny coaters, then we're going to need to do something with a border. So it looks a little bit weird just blending nicely into that. So let's stick with the metal for now. And where does this bring us out to? Okay, that's good. So if we do it like this, it's breaking up the shape further. So I like to play around with shapes when I'm decorating. And it often means that I end up building these weird and wonderful shapes that I really regret doing because they can be quite difficult. But as long as you're not trying to do curves, generally speaking, you have quite a bit of freedom to play around with. So we could just repeat this either side. I know there's not much to see for the time being, but when we get a bit of perspective, you can see it's coming along quite nicely. So we have two options. We can either create a little straight section here along the center part and then play around with the depth of the wall beneath it, or we could actually play around with bringing down diagonally sections of the roof so that it goes all the way through, but then we will kind of hide all of this, which I quite like the look of. So let's just complete this section and then we'll talk about the walling. And here we are with it so far. So you can see we've just got a lip above the roof, and if we jump across here, we have a little hollowed out section. I think this would be fantastic for lighting once we have some oscillators. And the other thing would be to now work on the actual walls. Here, we could potentially, if we wanted to, and I think we'll try it, and I don't recommend doing this for your first playthrough, but just to give you an idea as to what you can do, if we grab a foundation and we twist this all the way around so that the straight edge here is aligned with this section, we can then bring this down and we can use this as a marker for where we want to place a wall. So for example, if we wanted to grab a glass wall, we could now use this foundation, and providing we've got the right position, you can see this is now aligned. In fact, we place it there. Now we can just bring this across, and because we're off grid now, there is going to be a weird lip here. But what we could do with this, if we don't want to cover over the window here with another one, we could just add a pillar here and bring that down. I wasn't actually considering doing this, but it might be nice just to do it for the sake of doing it. Okay, so we can get rid of that, and now we've got a diagonal window in one corner. So I'm just giving you ideas as to how you can play around with this. I don't recommend necessarily jumping to playing around with the different shapes to quite this extent, but it does give you an idea as to how I do my builds. And so we've just blended that edge in. That looks quite clean, and then we can do something here. And providing we repeat this on the other side, we don't necessarily have to do the diagonal wall. I don't think we'll be able to do it. Have it there. We could nudge that using H. What if we do that? Might take a little bit of work, but we could just repeat this all the way along. Have it as a little wall for the conveyors. Okay. Let's play around with this. If I don't like it, we can obviously delete it and just rebuild. And that's something you shouldn't be afraid of doing in Satisfactory. There's something wrong with that one. They've all got a little bit of a gap, but I'm not that bothered. Could I just... It might be easier if I just do... It is. We can now get rid of the gap. So instead of trying to place it on the rooftop, I can just nudge it across. So the way you nudge something, you press H to snap it in position once you've got the hologram down, and then you can use the left, right, up and down keys to nudge it into position. And you can use Control if you want to do half increments, and you can also use page up and page down in order to nudge the hologram up or down. I'm quite intrigued as to how this will look once it's done. Also, when it comes to decorating, one thing that I think is important to bear in mind is playing about with the different pieces that we've got. We're so lucky in Satisfactory that we have the ability to soft clip things, which means you can place two pieces inside one another, depending on the piece. So that's not particularly artistic soft clipping. Kind of like that. We were to do something like that all the way across, and I won't be able to get the same position anyway. But doing soft clipping, you can do some interesting designs and play about with pieces to make them look different. So I highly recommend experimenting and playing with pieces in Satisfactory, because it's something that a lot of games don't allow you to do, and it's a real shame because there's so much freedom in it. I like it, but there is a problem. We're using too much white, and so it stands out more the front than blend in with the rest of the build. So what I think we'll have to do here is, if we drop back down again, we're going to maybe use... Ooh, it looks different, doesn't it, that colour? Place that there and see what colour that gives us. It's not quite the same, but I think it'll work. And I'm just going to place the carbon material just on the outer section. Yeah, that looks better. I'm going to leave that for a second whilst I quickly go over here and do the same on this piece. And now let's have a look at the wall. So I'm going to give myself a little platform to work from. And so here we have this whole section that we could do with blending in. One thing that I like to play around with, as you've seen, is playing with pillars. And we can go from big pillars to small pillars. We can use framed pieces. And I think what would be nice is maybe we grab our curved foundation pieces. We do this either side, and then we place the pillars on the inner section. So here we can bring up our pillars like so. And then we need to find a way to kind of blend this in better. And I think maybe if we go with something like the coated foundation, Probably do pushing it back a little bit more as well. And maybe using the metal beam. That's looking alright. I just wonder if we go with... Still looks a bit clean. So from here I'm going to layer it up with more build pieces, as you can see. And I quite like the industrial feel of the framed pieces. If we bring that just one step behind, it means that we get to see the copper material as well as the beam followed by the frame. Then we just need to hide the background. We could probably do with like this. How would that look? You know what? I like that, because we could create a pillar out of this and then use our lighting trick with the signs. We just grab this really quickly and remove this, as you've seen us do previously. And let's go with orange. From here, we can nudge this either inside you know what, I think outside would be better. Here's a little trick for you as well. So if you notice with these, when you place them against the edge, if you use the half increment, it's a full, well, half increment. However, if you want to get in between pieces, you can place the sign edge just in the top corner like that, and then you can nudge it across and you'll have a half increment of a half increment, which is a fun little trick, can be useful sometimes. Let's get rid of those, place that down and see how this looks. We'll do this on either side. And really this all starts off with just experimenting and playing around and seeing what works well and what doesn't. That works pretty well. That, maybe it's just that it's getting dark, but I really like that. And what's better yet with something like this, could try with the green maybe. But we can turn this into a blueprint so that we can easily repeat this for our builds. So what I'm going to do now is wait till morning so that we can see if this is what we like. But at the same time, I'll quickly do a blueprint of this so that if we do like it, we can just rinse and repeat it across really easily. It is a beautiful new day, and as you can see, we have changed the color of the lights, but I've also created this as a blueprint now. I realized that's ever so slightly off. If we look at the edges, the top section is slightly further in than the lower one. So this one's just a touch different, but I'm really happy with how that's turned out. And so we're just going to repeat this now on each of the middle sections so that they're all in line. And of course we'll need to get rid of this one because it's slightly incorrectly placed. And we'll replace it with a blueprinted version. We'll do the same just in the corner here. There's that one and that one. So as you can see, this has totally changed the look of the build. We're not quite there yet. We still have the inner sections to fill in. You don't have to do that, but it's something that I like to do. And I think let's go with a hex wall in the center. See how that looks. Hex frame. I think that's looking pretty nice actually, just as it is. We can add a frame around it if we want. I think that's pretty solid as a front wall design actually. So we're going to repeat that all the way along. And then once that's done, let's have a look at how we can improve this further. Well, that looks fantastic in my opinion. So you can see how creating little blueprints as modules for decoration can be really useful at allowing you to create decorated pieces that are quick to do and easy to replicate. Something like this may take 5 minutes or 3 minutes to do a single one, but then to do it each time, it can really build up. And so by creating a module, you're able to do this a lot quicker. So I do highly recommend that. I'm going to now remove these. And the next thing that I want to do is try and blend the top in a little bit more. So to do that, I'm going to grab myself a beam and then bring that beam all the way to the top. And we're going to do this, I think it's every other, yeah. So once again, we're using the method of layering pieces on top of one another, just to build up a little bit of depth, but we're also following the same kind of style that we've been doing for the rest of the build. This will hopefully make it blend in with the theme. Again, just having that little beam there makes a fair bit of difference because it just adds more shadows for the light to play around with. And that's why I just find adding a little bit of depth by layering up your pieces can add a lot to the build. We're now going to do the same but with the copper pillar piece. And to do that, we just need to snap it to the edge like we've done here, and then we can nudge this. Ooh. Now I want it in between that. So we're not gonna, I don't think we're gonna see it there. Oh, we do. That's a turnout. Okay, let's repeat that. I'm really happy with how that's turned out. I think the last thing that we need to do is add a little bit of copper trim around this. Maybe even, yeah, maybe a bit of light. I'm not sure. Yeah, we could do a bit of light on the bottom, kind of like a scanner coming in. Let's try that. So this should be really easy to do. We can just run that along here, providing that doesn't stick out. That's good. Then this isn't a copper trim. How does that look? Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. And perhaps we can do that also there as well. Wonderful. Oh, I'm really happy with that. We've got a little entrance here. It's not necessarily a doorway, but we can still use it as an entrance to the rest of the factory. So that is a great start for the outer shell. The next thing that we need to do is to look at the internal design. And the first thing to bear in mind is once you have an entrance to your facility is thinking about the walkways. So we can walk around here and then down this point. And you can see we've already planned out our walkways, which is quite nice. But for the rest of the areas, I'd like to close them off just so that I don't get tempted to slide under them. So from here, all we're going to do is nudge these and then run them all the way alongside the edge of the line, like so. We can plug up the gaps using soft clipping as well, and we'll run this all the way out. I'm going to do this for the whole factory really quickly, and then once that's done, we'll talk about the walkway design. As you can see, we have now cordoned off all of the conveyors, which leaves us the ability to walk through the factory lines as we had anticipated. We've also got a walkway up to the next floor. And the next thing that I want to talk about is the materials. Now, you've already seen the coated floors in use. These look particularly good within your factory because they're great at reflecting light if you do use lights or signs in your factories. So I'm going to go across everything now with this, and then once that's done, we'll work on the next element. There is more that I want to do with the walkways. At the moment, they look very plain. Again, we are going to look at layering and adding detail. But one thing that I thought I should mention is this section here, because of course we have used the diagonal pieces to create this diagonal wall. So how do we create a diagonal coated flooring. Well, thankfully, it's actually much easier than trying to do the walls in the first place. So what we're going to do is just delete that section, and then we're going to grab the opposite of this, actually. We'll need one of these, so we'll grab our down corner ramp. We're going to grab the coated floor, and we want the straight section, the flat half, to be the section that we want the coated floor to run along. And then we're going to go to our foundations again, but instead of going with the up corners, we're going to go to the inverted up corners. And you'll notice that we can't place the inverted corner here, but if we grab a 1 meter, there we go. I didn't read the sign. It says there's a player in the way. Yeah, you have to use either a 1 meter or 4 meter, because if it recognizes it as a 2 meter and you've used a 2 meter for the down ramp, it believes that it's the same piece being placed, and you can't place the exact foundation within itself. So if we move this over here, I stand corrected, you can. You never used to be able to, but the point is it won't allow you to do it unless you change to a 1 meter or a 4 meter. And from here we can just place this down, and you can see we've now got a lovely little diagonal walkway. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's have a look at patterns. Patterns we unlocked earlier. These can be placed on the floor, and if you hold E, you obviously have your radial dial. Unfortunately, we can't layer multiple patterns on top of one another on a given foundation. It won't allow you to do that. So what I tend to do is just add a little bit of detail along certain points, like this area where there's a little bit of factory floor hanging out. And one thing to bear in mind with the color here, the color of the pattern is dictated by the color swatch that you have. So for example, the orange is the secondary color, and we're using the white one at the moment. So if our secondary color was something like this, you'll see that the coated floor is now going to be black and the pattern red, like so. But of course, if we use too much red within a factory, it's going to look a little bit weird. So for this, you want to find complementary colors. I don't think yellow or orange works particularly well. I don't mind that green. Olive. Okay. I'm going to grab that swatch and we're going to adjust it. I quite like the blue, and we want to have maybe a grey or a darker blue. How would that look? It's a little bit too purple. Okay, that could work. I mean, normally the warning sections would be a brighter color. Don't let that worry you. In fact, yeah, maybe it should be orange. Let's stick with that. Unless we end up changing the rest of the factory line. At this point, we've played around with the patterns. We've added a little bit more depth with things like the barrier. Next thing that we want to look at is the lighting and labeling. So lighting for me comes in the form, as you've guessed, with signs. And with this, I like to have something a little bit dimmer. You can see we've turned the brightness down ever so slightly, but you can run these around the borders of the facility. In fact, I think they're still a touch too bright. Another thing that I like to do is if we grab something like our low barrier here, you may have seen it in previous videos, but from here we're grabbing our sign and we're just going to paste it or place it within the barrier itself. So that's a great way to add a cool looking light design to your factory, and you can turn that into a blueprint if you want as well. I think it would be better to place this along the opposite side. So we're just going to remove that now. I'll probably have these placed intermittently, maybe just on these sections, or perhaps, better yet, nestled within the little concrete section here. I think that works quite well. Let's do that. And then we can talk about labeling. So if we go all the way to the start of our factory, as your factories get bigger, you may want to use some kind of labeling to direct you within your factory. And once again, I use signs for this. And all it requires really is placing down a sign, making sure it's the right way around. So the arrow there points to the top, not the base. And then from here we can put, say, something like storage. And I tend to get rid of the lighting, or only keep it to a emission of 1, and turn the sign to a shiny surface. And then remove the background. And for the layout, make sure that it's in the center. From here, I like to have a 1 meter sign, small signs. And we're going for the same kind of style, except I tend to use the monochrome section. So maybe storage would look like this, and then I would have an arrow pointing in the direction of storage. And you can do this for however many items that you want around your facility. And then last but not least, if you really want to, you can do some other signage around the outside, taking that tip that we mentioned earlier. And you can also do the same system with the side, not just the end edge. So as you can see, I nudged that into the right position that we wanted. And then we can use this edge to get it there. And maybe we can just change this to a brighter color to light the system up. Another thing that you might find useful is if you want to get rid of these little black lines, what you can do is just snap the sign within one another. That works. So, and there you go. You have a nice little sign there. Now I'm going to start adding some more light to the facility, and alongside this strip lighting, I will also add some ceiling lights as well. One thing, if you're ever doing something that takes a lot of work in terms of decoration, like we mentioned before, do remember just to do some kind of blueprint for it. It will save you so much time. If I grab a beam really quickly, now these, we can add ourselves a little directional light. So from here, we've added a beam to a wall, and then holding control and using the mouse wheel, we can rotate this. And this allows us to create a little type of light in our facility. I'm not sure why I'm nudging these in when we do have that exact size, oh, slightly bigger even, sign available. But there you go. We're now going to play around with that, and once I've done with the decor, hopefully you'll have something to check out in game. You can see we've added the light strips across the top. Unfortunately, I can't do the lighting that I wanted to do. Well, I can. I'll show you now because I've just put on the advanced game settings so that I can show you the large billboard in action. So what I had originally planned, we builds a walkway and then avoids using the walkways. Well done, Total. If we give me 2 moments. So when it comes to lighting, ooh, we've got the these poking through. That could actually be used for a different type of light. Anyway, if we place one of these down here, that's about right. And then we just change that to the light. You'll see that this has a lot more surface area, and so it's able to actually light up the floor below you. And you can see this also works really well with the small billboards as well. But unfortunately we don't have the oscillators, so we're not going to be using them for this part of the playthrough. Now, I was debating to go over the whole of this facility and update everything, but I think we should probably save that for when we do have things like oscillators available to really highlight sections of the build. So we're going to leave it here for this one, having done a bit of the internals, but having also renovated the outer shell of the build. And I'm really happy with what we've done here, something a little bit different to what I normally do. But we will leave it here for this one, and we are going to allow you to check out this save yourself. So if that is something that interests you, and I will do my best to find time to decorate the rest of this world in my spare time, do check out the link in the description below. It'll be a Google Drive link, and all you need to do is download the save from the Google Drive, and you can use it if you want, or even destroy it, break it down, see what I've done. The choice is yours. But we are going to leave it there for today. So I hope you have enjoyed this one. If you have, hit the thumbs up. And if you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe. And make sure, one thing I should mention, if you're wondering about the playlist and the episodes, then do check the actual playlist. Everything will be in chronological order. A few people have asked over time, why don't we have episode 1, 2, 3, and 4? And the reason for that is just on YouTube, if someone sees episode 8 and they haven't watched the 8 videos prior, they're probably not going to watch it. It's something that I've learnt over time looking at the statistics of videos, and so by not numbering them, it actually helps the videos perform better. So that's why we don't do that, but if you want them in chronological order, do subscribe to the playlist and you'll also be updated as new videos come out. But guys, thank you for watching, and thanks as always goes to all of our incredible supporters on Patreon who make content like this possible. Most notably our Lunar Eclipse Patreons, Firefless, The Calamity, Ben, Star, and Seeker Kala, as well as our Blood Moon of the Day, which today is King Zoron. But until next time, as always, ciao for now.